My family said I was such an embarrassment that they couldn't bear to introduce me to anyone. So they told everyone I was working abroad on a humanitarian mission. 8 years. Not a single birthday text. Not one phone call when my grandmother passed away. I didn't exist. Until Forbes put my face on their cover with the words $1.2 billion. 48 hours after that magazine hit newsstands, my mother sent her first message in 8 years. Family Christmas gathering at 6:30. We have something serious to talk about. I'm Exley Yeager, 31 years old. And this is the story of how I came home on Christmas Eve, not to ask for forgiveness, but to collect what was mine. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. It all started in Fairfield County, Connecticut, where family status was measured in Ivy League degrees and the number of German cars in your garage. Fairfield County wasn't just a place, it was a performance. Every manicured lawn, every country club membership, every carefully curated dinner party was a statement. And my family? The Yeagers were masters of the stage. My father, Howard Yeager, ran Yeager and Associates, a commercial real estate consulting firm that had been in our family for 3 generations. In 2016, the company employed 47 people and pulled in $12 million in annual revenue. He wore that number like a badge, mentioning it at every cocktail party, every holiday gathering, every chance he got. My mother, Patricia, was something else entirely. She'd been an editor at a lifestyle magazine in her 20s, but by the time I was born, she'd transitioned into what she called managing the family's reputation. In practice, that meant she decided who sat where at every dinner, who got invited to which events, and whose name was never mentioned in polite company. Growing up, the expectations were crystal clear. Graduate from an Ivy League school, join the family business, marry someone appropriate, smile for the Christmas card. I remember the exact moment I realized I would never fit their mold. It was Thanksgiving dinner, 2014. I was 21, a junior at Columbia, and I made the mistake of mentioning I was taking an elective in computer programming. My mother set down her wine glass with a precision that could cut steel. Computers are for people who have nothing interesting to say, Exley. The Yeagers build relationships, not software. 14 family members laughed politely. My father didn't even look up from his plate. I smiled, nodded, and said nothing. That was my role, the quiet daughter who followed instructions. But 2 years later, I would stop following instructions entirely, and that's when I became dead to them. March 2016. I was 23, halfway through my junior year at Columbia, when I received a phone call that changed everything. A former classmate named Marcus had started a fintech company in Austin, Texas. They were building payment processing software for small businesses, nothing glamorous, but the technology was solid. He needed a CTO, someone who understood both business and code. I know you've been doing freelance development on the side, Marcus said. I've seen your work. You're better than half the engineers I've interviewed. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. I ran the numbers. I weighed the risks. And then I made the hardest decision of my life. I called my parents on a Sunday evening when I knew they'd both be home. I told them I was leaving Columbia to join a startup. The silence on the other end of the line lasted exactly 11 seconds, I counted. Then my father spoke, his voice flat. I see. He hung up without another word. I later learned he left the room and didn't speak to my mother for the rest of the night. My mother's response came 2 days later, in a text message that I still have saved on my phone. Don't use the Yeager name in any of that garbage company's documents. That was the last direct communication I received from either of them for 8 years. No birthday cards, no Christmas calls, no notification when my grandmother, my mother's own mother, passed away in 2019. I found out a month later through a cousin's Instagram post. When relatives asked about me, my mother had a ready answer. Exley is doing humanitarian work abroad, very noble, but she's quite busy. A beautiful lie to cover an ugly truth. I wasn't abroad, I was erased. Austin welcomed me with open arms and a brutal learning curve. That first startup with Marcus? It failed within 18 months. We burned through our seed funding too fast, made rookie mistakes with our pricing model, and watched our runway shrink to nothing. By December 2017, I was sleeping on a friend's couch, wondering if my parents had been right all along. But failure, I discovered, is just tuition for the next attempt. In 2019, I connected with two engineers I'd met during my first startup's death spiral, Jordan Mills and Rebecca Torres. We had an idea. A B2B payment platform that could integrate with legacy accounting systems, boring on paper, revolutionary in practice. We called it Strata Financial Technologies. I put in the last $8,000 I had. Jordan maxed out 2 credit cards. Rebecca sold her car. By 2021, we'd closed our Series A, $18 million. I became CEO. The tech press started paying attention. 2023 brought our Series C, an evaluation of $400 million. We were processing over 2 billion in transactions monthly. Through all of it, I never reached out to my family, not once. The silence worked both ways, but I did something else, something I've never told anyone publicly until now. In early 2022, I hired a law firm to monitor the financial health of Yeager and Associates. At first, I told myself it was just curiosity, a way to stay informed. But as the reports started coming in, declining revenue, lost clients, mounting debt, I realized I was preparing for something. I just didn't know what yet. The quarterly updates became monthly, then weekly. By the time Forbes called in September 2024, I knew more about my father's company than he probably did. November 2024. The Forbes photographer asked me to stand by the window in our Austin headquarters, morning light streaming across my face. The headline they'd chosen: The Quiet Architect of America's Fastest-Growing Payment Platform. Strata Financial had just closed our Series D. Valuation, $1.2 billion. I was officially a billionaire on paper, though most of that was tied up in equity I couldn't touch. The magazine hit newsstands on a Tuesday. By Wednesday evening, my phone buzzed with a notification I'd stopped expecting years ago. Mom, family Christmas gathering at 6:30. We have something serious to talk about. No greeting, no "how are you?" No acknowledgement of 8 years of silence, just a command, as if I were still the obedient daughter she could summon at will. I stared at that message for a long time. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from a cold, crystalline anger I hadn't felt in years. Then I called Lydia Chenokonkwo, my attorney at Morrison & Blackwell LLP. I need an update on Yeager and Associates, I said. Everything you have. 20 minutes later, she called back with the numbers. Yeager and Associates owed $4.7 million to Meridian Trust Bank. The loan was secured against commercial property the company managed. Deadline for repayment, January 15, 2025. Just 23 days after Christmas. Revenue had dropped 62% since 2016. Staff had shrunk from 47 to 18. 2 of their largest clients had walked away the previous year. My father's empire was crumbling. And now, after 8 years of treating me like I was dead, they needed money. Lydia, I said slowly, tell me again about that debt purchase option we discussed. What she told me next changed everything. Meridian Trust has been trying to offload this debt for 3 months, Lydia explained. It's classified as distressed, high risk of default. They'd rather sell it at a discount than deal with the foreclosure process. I leaned back in my office chair, watching the Austin skyline fade into dusk. How much of a discount? Standard range for distressed commercial debt is 20 to 40% below face value. Given the timeline pressure and your father's documented inability to pay, she paused. I'd estimate we could acquire it for $3.2 million, maybe less. I did the math in my head. $3.2 million to own $4.7 million in debt, a 32% discount. And once we own it, You'd have full legal authority to demand repayment, restructure the terms, or initiate foreclosure proceedings. The debtor, in this case, Yeager and Associates, would have to negotiate with you directly. There was something almost poetic about it. For 8 years, my parents had acted as if I didn't exist. Now I could own the very foundation their lives were built upon. There's something else, Lydia added. I obtained a copy of an email your father sent to Meridian Trust on December 3rd. He explicitly stated the company has no ability to meet the payment deadline and requested a 6-month extension. They denied it. My father had admitted, in writing, that he was broke. We need to move fast, I said. Can we close before Christmas? If we wire the funds by December 17th, we can execute the assignment by the 18th. I'd recommend using a special purpose vehicle. Keeps your name off the public documents until you're ready to reveal yourself. Do it. I ended the call and looked at my mother's text message again. Now I had something serious to talk about too. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, running through every possible scenario, every choice, every consequence. Option 1, ignore the message. Continue living my life as if they didn't exist. Let my father's company collapse under its own weight. Never look back. But that would mean they controlled the story. Patricia would tell everyone I abandoned the family in their time of need. I'd be the villain in a narrative I never chose. Option 2, show up and refuse to help. Let them beg, say no, and leave. A small satisfaction, but an empty one. Nothing would change except the volume of their resentment. Option 3, show up with leverage. I sat down at my kitchen table and spread out the documents Lydia had sent. The company's balance sheet, the loan terms, the email where my father admitted defeat. My parents didn't want a relationship with me. They wanted a transaction. They'd ignored me when I had nothing. Now that I had something they needed, suddenly family mattered again. Fine. If they wanted to speak the language of transactions, I would become fluent. But I needed to be clear about what I wanted. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge is messy, emotional, unsatisfying. This was about closure. I wanted my father to look me in the eye and know that everything he'd built now depended on the daughter he'd written off as a failure. I wanted my mother to understand that her carefully constructed reality, the lies, the erasure, the pretense, had been built on a foundation I now owned. And then I wanted to walk away, on my terms, with boundaries they could never cross again. I texted back 2 words, I'll come. Then I called Lydia. Start the wire transfer. I want that debt by December 18th. December 18th, 2024. 2:47 p.m. Central Time. I sat in Morrison and Blackwell's Austin office, watching Lydia slide a stack of documents across the conference table. The winter sun cut harsh lines through the blinds. This is the assignment of debt agreement, she said, tapping the first page. Northwind Acquisition LLC, that's your SPV, is acquiring the full $4.7 million in outstanding debt from Meridian Trust Bank for $3.2 million. I picked up the pen. My hand was steady. Section 4.2 is the key provision, Lydia continued. It grants the acquiring party, you, full authority to demand immediate repayment, negotiate restructuring terms, or initiate collection proceedings at your sole discretion. I signed my name on the designated line. The ink felt permanent. And this, Lydia handed me a second document, is a certified copy of the email Howard Yeager sent to Meridian Trust on December 3rd. We obtained it legally as part of the due diligence process for the debt acquisition. I read my father's words again. We regret to inform you that Yeager and Associates does not have the ability to meet the January 15th payment deadline. We respectfully request a 6-month extension to restructure our obligations. He'd begged, and they'd said no. Now I was his new creditor, and he didn't even know it. One more thing, I said. I want the identity of the acquiring party kept confidential until December 25th. Is that possible? Absolutely. There's no legal requirement to notify the debtor of a change in creditor until collection action is initiated. You can reveal yourself whenever you choose. I tucked both documents into my briefcase. Then I'll reveal myself at Christmas dinner, right after they ask me for money. Lydia allowed herself a small smile. I'll be on standby. December 20th. My phone buzzed while I was reviewing quarterly projections. Mom, did you get my message? I let it sit for an hour before responding. Me. I'll consider it. The reply came within 30 seconds. Mom, don't consider. This is family. 6:30. Don't be late. No question about how I was doing. No acknowledgement of the 8 years between us. Just commands. The same tone she'd used when I was 17 and forgot to set the table. Me. What do we need to discuss? Mom. Not something for the phone. Your father and I need you there. I noticed she said need, not want. A small distinction that revealed everything. Me. I'll be there. Mom. Good, dress appropriately. I stared at that last message for a long time. Dress appropriately. As if I were still the college dropout in secondhand jeans, not the CEO of a billion-dollar company. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the Strata Financial org chart. I found my executive assistant's number. Claire, I need you to cancel my meetings from December 23rd through 26th. I'm taking a personal trip to Connecticut. Of course. Should I book your usual hotel in Hartford? Yes. And Claire, can you set up a timed email for me? If I don't manually cancel it by 10 p.m. on December 24th, I want it to go out automatically. What should the email say? I thought for a moment. Just a set of documents to be forwarded to my attorney. I'll send you the details. A backup plan. Because I'd learned long ago that when dealing with Patricia Yeager, you always needed a backup plan. She thought she was summoning a prodigal daughter. She had no idea she was inviting her creditor to dinner. December 23rd. I packed methodically, laying each item on my bed before placing it in my carry-on. One charcoal cashmere blazer. Professional, understated. A white silk blouse. Dark slacks. Pearl earrings my grandmother had given me before she passed, mailed to me by a cousin who'd found my address online. I wasn't dressing for a Christmas party. I was dressing for a negotiation. The briefcase sat on my desk, already packed with the documents I'd need. The assignment of debt, signed and notarized. The email from my father admitting insolvency. A financial summary of Yeager and Associates showing their revenue decline from 2016 to 2024. A 62% drop charted in unforgiving detail. I'd printed 3 copies of everything. One for me, one for my father, one for anyone who questioned the facts. Before zipping the briefcase closed, I called Lydia. I land in Hartford at 2 p.m. tomorrow, I said. I'm planning to arrive at their house around 6:30. Can you be available by phone from that point forward? I'll block my entire evening. If things escalate legally, I can conference in within 30 seconds. Hopefully it won't come to that. Hopefully? Her tone suggested she wasn't optimistic. I ended the call and looked around my apartment. The Austin skyline glittered through my floor-to-ceiling windows. I'd built this life from nothing. From a couch in a friend's living room, from maxed-out credit cards, from 18-hour days and a stubbornness that bordered on obsessive. None of it had required my parents' approval. I picked up my carry-on and headed for the door. I wasn't bringing gifts to Christmas dinner. I was bringing evidence. And by the end of the night, everyone in that house would know exactly what I was worth. The call came as I was boarding my flight. An unfamiliar Connecticut number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Exley? The voice was tentative, almost fragile. It's Margaret, your aunt. I settled into my first-class seat, keeping my voice neutral. Aunt Margaret, it's been a while. 8 years? She laughed nervously. I know. I should have called sooner. I should have called 100 times. The flight attendant gestured for me to end my call. I held up one finger. Why are you calling now? A long pause. I could hear her breathing. I wanted to warn you, she finally said. About tomorrow. Things aren't things aren't the way Patricia is presenting them. What do you mean? Howard is in serious trouble. The company, the house, it's all falling apart. Patricia is acting like this is just a temporary setback, but Richard says. She stopped herself. Richard is my husband. He's in finance. He's seen the numbers. I already knew everything she was telling me, but I wanted to hear it from someone on the inside. What does Patricia want from me? Money. That's the serious discussion. She thinks you'll write a check because you're family. The bitterness in her voice was unmistakable. And you? What do you think? Another pause. I think they treated you terribly. I think I should have stood up for you and I didn't because I was afraid of Patricia. I'm still afraid of her. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry, Exley, for all of it. The flight attendant approached again. Final boarding. I appreciate you calling, Aunt Margaret. I mean that. Will you come tomorrow? Yes, but not for the reasons Patricia expects. I hung up before she could ask what I meant. December 23rd, 11:47 p.m. Hartford. My hotel room overlooked the frozen Connecticut River. The city below was quiet, decorated in tasteful holiday lights that reflected off patches of ice on the water. I sat by the window, unable to sleep, scrolling through old messages on my phone. I'd saved them all, every text from the before times, birthday wishes from my grandmother, a rare proud of you from my father after I'd made Dean's List sophomore year. Even the last message from my mother, don't use the Jaeger name in any of that garbage company's documents, still sat in my archive like a scar I couldn't stop touching. My grandmother's face smiled at me from a photo I kept in my phone's favorites. She'd died on a Tuesday in April 2019. I'd been in a board meeting when it happened. No one called. No one texted. I'd found out a month later from my cousin Derek's Instagram story. A photo of flowers on a grave, captioned, "Miss you, Grandma." I'd sobbed for 3 hours. Then I'd gone back to work. That was the day I stopped hoping they'd change. Now I closed the photo and opened my briefcase instead. The documents were still there, organized and ready. Everything I needed to end this chapter of my life. Tomorrow I would walk into that house for the first time in 8 years. I would sit at that table where they'd mocked my interests, dismissed my dreams, and ultimately erased my existence. And then I would show them exactly who I'd become. I finally fell asleep around 2 a.m., the documents spread across the bed beside me like a paper shield. The next day would be Christmas Eve, the last Christmas I would ever spend as a Jaeger in any way that mattered. If you've made it this far, I have to ask, what would you do? If your family went silent for 8 years, then suddenly reached out when they needed money, would you help them? Or would you set a boundary? I'd love to hear your answer in the comments below. And if you haven't already, please hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happened next. Because what happened at that Christmas dinner? Nobody saw it coming. December 24th, Christmas Eve, 2:23 p.m. The wheels of my flight touched down at Hartford Bradley International Airport, and suddenly I was 23 again. The last time I'd been here, I was carrying a single suitcase and a one-way ticket to Austin. No one had come to see me off. I'd taken an Uber to the airport, watching Connecticut's perfect lawns and perfect hedges disappear in the rearview mirror, wondering if I was making the biggest mistake of my life. 8 years later, I walked through the same terminal with a carry-on and a briefcase worth more than my father's remaining assets. At the rental car counter, I chose a silver sedan, nothing flashy. I wasn't here to impress anyone. As I pulled onto I-91 South toward Fairfield County, my phone buzzed with an email notification. From Lydia Chen Okonkwo. Subject, confirmation, standby ready. All documents verified and ready for presentation. I'll be available by phone from 6 o'clock p.m. EST forward. Northwind Acquisition LLC remains unlisted in public records. Your identity as acquiring party is still confidential. Good luck. Good luck. as if luck had anything to do with what was about to happen. The highway stretched before me, lined with bare winter trees and patches of old snow. I passed familiar exits: Meriden, Wallingford, New Haven, each one bringing me closer to a past I'd spent 8 years trying to outrun. I wasn't running anymore. The GPS showed 47 minutes to Fairfield County, 47 minutes until I walked into that house, 47 minutes until they learned that the daughter they'd erased had become the person holding their future in her hands. I turned up the heat and kept driving. Some homecomings are reunions. This one was a reckoning. 4:15 p.m. I pulled into a small coffee shop in Westport, 10 minutes from my parents' house. I needed caffeine. I needed to steady myself. I needed just a few more minutes before facing the performance that awaited me. The cafe was warm and smelled of cinnamon. Christmas music played softly. A few other customers sat scattered around the room, wrapped in expensive coats, tapping on laptops. I ordered a black coffee and found a corner seat. That's when I heard my name. Exley? Exley Yeager? A woman my age approached my table, eyes wide with recognition. It took me a moment to place her. Emily Thornton, 2 years ahead of me at Fairfield Prep. We'd been in student council together. Emily, hi. I managed a polite smile. She slid into the seat across from me without asking. Oh my God, I saw the Forbes article. Everyone's been talking about it. $1 billion company? That's insane. It's been a journey. I bet. She leaned in, lowering her voice conspiratorially. You know, people in town are talking about more than just your success. I took a slow sip of my coffee. What do you mean? Your dad's company. Word is they're in real trouble. Someone at the country club said they might lose the house. She raised her eyebrows meaningfully. Your mom's been very quiet at the holiday committee meetings. Very unlike her. So the rumors had already spread. Patricia's carefully constructed image was crumbling, and the social circle she'd spent decades cultivating was watching. I don't really keep up with family news, I said carefully. Of course, of course. Emily nodded knowingly. Well, it's wonderful to see you thriving. Really. Some of us always knew you'd do something amazing. I doubted that was true, but I thanked her anyway. The gossip mill was already spinning. 6:15 p.m., Christmas Eve. I sat in my rental car outside the Yeager family home, engine idling, heat blasting against the December cold. The house looked exactly as I remembered it. A Tudor revival mansion worth $4.2 million according to my research, though that number would drop once word of the foreclosure risk got out. Stone facade, leaded glass windows, a perfectly manicured lawn, now dusted with snow. Christmas lights lined the roofline in tasteful white, and a massive wreath hung on the oak front door. Several cars were already parked in the circular driveway. I recognized Margaret's silver BMW, a black Mercedes that probably belonged to Richard. A newer Range Rover I didn't recognize. Derek, maybe? Others I couldn't place. 14 people, according to my mother's usual Christmas guest list. 14 witnesses to whatever was about to unfold. Through the front windows, I could see shadows moving, the warm glow of interior lights. A Christmas tree visible in the formal living room. From the outside, it looked like a holiday card, the perfect American family gathering. I knew better. I pulled out my phone and dialed Lydia. I'm here, I said. About to go in. I'm on standby. Just keep your phone accessible. If you need me to confirm anything legally, call and put me on speaker. Understood. Exley? Her voice softened slightly. Whatever happens in there, you've already won. Remember that. I ended the call and checked my briefcase one final time. The assignment of debt, the email from my father, the financial analysis. Everything was in order. I turned off the engine, stepped out into the cold Connecticut evening. The snow crunched under my heels as I walked toward the front door. They'd invited me home for Christmas. They had no idea they'd just invited their creditor to dinner. The door opened before I could ring the bell. My mother stood in the entryway, wearing a deep red dress that probably cost more than some people's monthly rent, Her hair was perfect, her makeup was flawless, and her smile was exactly as cold as I remembered. Exley, you came. Not a question, not a welcome, just an observation. Hello, Mother. She air-kissed my cheek without making contact. You look corporate. I didn't respond. I'd chosen my charcoal blazer and white silk blouse deliberately. I wasn't here for a party. I was here for business. The foyer opened into the living room, where a 12-foot Christmas tree dominated one corner. 14 faces turned toward me, some curious, some hostile, some carefully blank. My father stood by the fireplace, whiskey in hand. He'd aged more than 8 years should allow. His hair had gone fully gray, and the confident posture I remembered had crumbled into something that looked almost defeated. He nodded at me once, said nothing. Aunt Margaret rushed over and pulled me into a quick embrace. You came, she whispered. Thank God. Her husband Richard hung back, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. As a CFO, he would understand financial documents. He would recognize what I was carrying. Derek, my cousin, stood near the bar with his wife. He raised his glass in mock salute. The prodigal daughter returns, he announced to the room. Or should I say, the Forbes cover girl. A few people laughed nervously. I walked to an empty spot near the window, my briefcase tucked under my arm like a shield. My mother noticed it but didn't comment. The stage was set. The audience was assembled. Now I just had to wait for my mother to make her move. She wouldn't keep me waiting long. Dinner was served at 7. Roasted prime rib, scalloped potatoes, green beans with almonds. All the traditional Jaeger family dishes, prepared by a catering company since my mother had never learned to cook. I was seated at the far end of the table, the exile's position. Far from my parents, sandwiched between two distant cousins whose names I barely remembered. My mother commanded the room from the head of the table, my father silent at her side. It's wonderful to have the whole family together, Patricia announced, raising her wine glass. Especially those who've been away for so long. Several eyes flicked toward me. I kept eating. The prime rib was overcooked. The business has had some challenging years, my father said quietly, almost to himself. The real estate market isn't what it used to be. But family supports family, my mother cut in smoothly. That's what the Jaegers have always believed. We help each other through difficult times. I set down my fork. Is that what happened 8 years ago? When you helped me through my difficult time of starting a company? The table went silent. Patricia's smile didn't waver. You made your choice, Exley. We respected it. By not speaking to me for 8 years? By not telling me when grandmother died? We were giving you space. Her voice was ice wrapped in silk. You clearly needed it to find yourself. Derek snorted. Found about $1 billion from what I hear. Derek. Richard's voice was sharp. I picked up my fork again and continued eating. Let them squirm. Let them wonder. The main course wasn't even close yet. My mother watched me with calculating eyes. She was building towards something, I could feel it, and so was I. After dinner, my mother ushered everyone into the formal living room. Coffee and dessert were set on the sideboard, but no one moved toward them. The 14 of us arranged ourselves around the room. My father took the leather armchair by the fireplace. My mother stood beside him, one hand on his shoulder, a staged tableau of unity. Now that we're all together, Patricia began, there's something important we need to discuss as a family. Here it comes, I thought. Jaeger and Associates has faced some temporary challenges. She spoke as if reciting a press release. The real estate market has shifted, and we've had to make adjustments. But with the right support, we can stabilize and continue the legacy that Howard's grandfather built. She paused for effect. We need $5 million to restructure our obligations and secure the company's future. I felt every eye in the room turn toward me. And since Exley has done so remarkably well, Patricia's smile was almost gentle. We thought this might be an opportunity for her to reconnect with the family, to show that she still values her roots. My father finally spoke. It would be a loan, of course. We'd pay it back. This is family, Exley. My mother fixed me with a stare I remembered from childhood. Family doesn't keep score. Derek leaned forward eagerly. Come on, sis. You've got billions. 5 million is pocket change for you. I looked around the room. 14 faces, waiting for me to open my checkbook and prove I belonged. I set down my coffee cup very slowly. Mother, you just said family doesn't keep score. I reached for my briefcase. But before we discuss your request, I have some numbers I think you should see. The room went very, very still. My mother's eyes narrowed. What numbers? I didn't answer yet. I let the tension build, watching her compose her expression into something approaching patience. Exley. My father's voice was tired. We're asking for help. Is that really so unreasonable? You raised her for 22 years, Derek added. Schools, clothes, food, everything. A little gratitude wouldn't kill you. I'd been waiting for this. The guilt card. The ledger of debts they believed I owed. Let's talk about that, I said, keeping my voice even. Let's talk about what I owe you. Everything. My mother's mask slipped slightly. You owe us everything. We gave you a life and you threw it away to play startup with strangers in Texas. And then? And then you vanished. You didn't call. You didn't write. You abandoned us. I abandoned you? I leaned forward. You stopped speaking to me first. You told everyone I was doing humanitarian work abroad because you were too embarrassed to admit your daughter left Colombia for a tech company. That was to protect you. You didn't tell me when my grandmother died. That landed like a slap. Margaret looked away. Even Derek had the decency to lower his gaze. My mother recovered quickly. We didn't think you'd care. You'd made it clear you had no interest in family matters. She was my grandmother. She gave me these earrings. I touched the pearls at my ears. I found out she died from an Instagram post, a month after the funeral. Silence. My father rubbed his forehead. Richard shifted uncomfortably. Patricia straightened her spine. The past is the past. What matters now is the future. Are you going to help us or not? I pulled the folder from my briefcase and placed it on the coffee table. Let me show you what the future actually looks like. The folder sat on the coffee table between us. 20 pages, the weight of 8 years. No one moved. What is that? My father asked. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. Derek's hostility, Margaret's confusion, Richard's sudden alertness. He'd seen folders like this before. He knew what legal documents looked like. Before we talk about your $5 million, I said, we need to talk about 4.7 million. My father's face went pale. He knew that number. He'd written it in an email 2 weeks ago. Where did you? He started. Let me finish. I opened the folder and removed the first document. This is an assignment of debt agreement, executed on December 18, 2024. It transfers the full $4.7 million of debt owed by Yeager and Associates to Meridian Trust Bank. Patricia's hand tightened on my father's shoulder. What does that have to do with anything? The debt was purchased by a company called Northwind Acquisition LLC. I paused. An LLC that I control entirely. The room went dead silent. Richard stood up slowly, his CFO instincts taking over. He crossed the room and looked over my father's shoulder at the document. I watched him read, watched his expression shift from confusion to understanding, to something that might have been respect. This is legitimate, he said quietly. This is real. What's real? Patricia demanded. Howard, what is she talking about? My father didn't answer. He was staring at the document like it might catch fire. I pulled out the second page, the email he'd sent to Meridian Trust on December 3rd. Let me explain it more clearly, I said. And I did. On December 3rd, Father, You sent an email to Meridian Trust Bank. I held up the printed page. In it, you wrote, and I quote, Yeager and Associates does not have the ability to meet the January 15th payment deadline. My father's mouth opened. No words came out. When the bank denied your request for an extension, they began looking for a buyer for the distressed debt. Standard practice for loans they don't expect to collect. I placed the email beside the assignment document. I bought it, all of it, for $3.2 million. Patricia's composure shattered. You what? I am your creditor now. The words came out calm, precise. I own the debt that's secured against your commercial properties, the debt you cannot pay. 14 people sat frozen, staring at me like I'd just set the Christmas tree on fire. Richard broke the silence first. She's right. This is a standard debt acquisition, completely legal, and as the creditor, she has full authority to demand repayment or initiate foreclosure. This is insane. Derek jumped to his feet. You're going to foreclose on your own parents? I haven't said what I'm going to do yet. I kept my voice level. But I wanted you all to understand the situation before we continued discussing who owes what to whom. My mother's face had gone from red to white to something almost gray. You planned this. You bought our debt specifically to have a conversation as equals, I finished, for the first time in my life. My father finally looked up at me. Really looked at me. And for the first time I could remember, I saw something other than disappointment in his eyes. I saw fear. What do you want, Exley? He asked. Finally. The right question. Before I could answer, my mother launched her counterattack. This is monstrous! Patricia's voice rose, shaking with fury. You bought our debt? You're treating your own parents like debtors? Like strangers off the street? You treated me like a stranger for 8 years, I replied. Because you betrayed us. She was shouting now, all pretense of composure gone. You left. You dropped out of Columbia, an Ivy League school, Exley, to play entrepreneur in Texas. You humiliated this family. I didn't humiliate anyone. I built a company worth $1.2 billion. You're the one who told people I was doing humanitarian work abroad because the truth embarrassed you. Patricia turned to the room, arms spread wide. Do you all see this? She came here to destroy us, her own family. I came here because you invited me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You texted me for the first time in 8 years, not to apologize, not to reconnect, but to ask for money. And now you're angry because I have leverage? This isn't leverage. This is revenge. No, Mother. This is consequences. Derek moved toward me, face flushed with alcohol and anger. You selfish— Derek, sit down. Richard's command cut through the room like a blade. Derek stopped, surprised by his stepfather's tone. Richard addressed my mother directly. Patricia, the documents are legally binding. Exley is within her rights as the creditor. Insulting her won't change that. Margaret spoke for the first time since dinner. Patricia, please, just let her speak. My mother stood trembling, her perfect holiday destroyed, her carefully managed world crumbling around her. I waited until she had no more arrows to fire. Then I told them what I actually wanted. Richard stepped forward, addressing the room with the calm authority of someone who'd spent decades managing boardroom crises. Before anyone else speaks, let me clarify the legal reality here. He picked up the assignment of debt and studied it properly. This agreement was executed by Meridian Trust's CEO. It's notarized. Section 4.2 grants the acquiring party, Northwind Acquisition, which Exley controls, full authority over the debt. That means she can demand immediate repayment, she can restructure the terms, or she can initiate collection proceedings. Richard, whose side are you on? Patricia hissed. I'm on the side of facts. He set the document down. And the facts are these. Howard's company owes $4.7 million it cannot pay. The original creditor sold that debt to Exley's company. She is now legally the person you owe money to. But she's our daughter. That doesn't change contract law. Richard turned to me, his expression neutral but professional. Exley, you've made your position clear. What are you proposing? I appreciated his directness. Of everyone in this room, Richard was the only one treating this like what it actually was, a negotiation. I'm not here to destroy anyone, I said. I'm here to close a chapter. Permanently. My father looked up. What does that mean? It means I'm willing to offer terms, fair terms. But they come with conditions that aren't negotiable. Margaret touched her husband's arm. Let her explain. I pulled out the final document from my briefcase, a term sheet I'd had Lydia prepare. This is my offer. Read it carefully. You have 48 hours to decide. Patricia grabbed for it, but my father got there first. His hands were shaking as he unfolded the paper. It's in writing, I said, because family doesn't keep score. The terms are simple, I said as my father read. First, you sell this house. Current market value is approximately $4.2 million. That goes toward paying off the $4.7 million in debt. Patricia gasped. Sell the house? This has been in the family for... Let me finish. I didn't raise my voice. Second, I will forgive the remaining $500,000. Consider it a final gift, a closure payment. The room was silent. Third, and this is the part that matters, in exchange for the debt forgiveness, you sign a legal agreement waiving any future financial claims against me. No requests for loans, no emergency calls for money, no mentions of inheritance, nothing. Ever again. My father's hands trembled as he reached the final page. You're cutting us off, he said quietly. No. You cut me off 8 years ago. I'm just making it official. Patricia snatched the document from his hands. This is blackmail. You're forcing us to sell our home. I'm offering you an exit that doesn't end in foreclosure and bankruptcy court. I kept my voice steady. You can accept these terms and walk away with your dignity intact. Or you can refuse and I'll pursue collection through standard legal channels. Your choice. You'd really do that? To your own parents? I looked at her. Really looked at her. For the first time in 8 years. You didn't call me when grandmother died. You told everyone I didn't exist. You texted me after 8 years of silence only because you needed money. I stood, gathering my documents. I'm not the one who chose this. I'm just the one ending it. I walked toward the door. You have 48 hours. My lawyer will send the formal paperwork tomorrow. Merry Christmas. Okay, I have to pause here and ask you. Do you think I went too far? Or do you think my parents had this coming after 8 years of pretending I didn't exist? I really want to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments. And if you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these videos. And honestly, it lets me know you want to hear more stories like this one. Now let me tell you what happened next. The night air hit my face like a benediction. Cold, clean, free. I was halfway down the front steps when I heard the door open behind me. Exley, wait! My mother's voice. I stopped but didn't turn around. You can't do this to us. We're your family. Whatever happened in the past, we can work it out. Come back inside and talk like civilized people. I turned slowly. Patricia stood in the doorway, the warm light of the house framing her silhouette. She looked smaller somehow, less powerful. For 8 years, I said, I waited for you to talk to me like I was family. One phone call. One text that wasn't about needing something, just one sign that you remembered I existed. We gave you space. You erased me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You lied to everyone about where I was because the truth was too embarrassing. You didn't tell me my grandmother was dying. You didn't tell me when she died. You didn't even tell me where she was buried. Patricia's mouth opened and closed. And then Forbes happened, and suddenly I exist again. Suddenly there's a family Christmas gathering and something serious to talk about. I shook my head. You didn't want a daughter back. You wanted a checkbook. That's not 48 hours. I walked to my car. After that, the offer expires. From inside the house, I heard Derek's voice rise in anger, quickly silenced by Richard. Margaret appeared at the door beside Patricia. Exley, I'm sorry. For all of it. I should have said something years ago. I paused with my hand on the car door. Thank you for that, Aunt Margaret. It means something. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I got in the car and drove away without looking back. I pulled into the hotel parking lot and sat in the dark for a long moment, letting my heart beat slow. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. The adrenaline that had carried me through the last 3 hours was finally beginning to fade. I dialed Lydia. I heard everything through the phone in your pocket, she said when she answered. You left it connected. I hadn't realized. And? You were remarkable, calm, professional, fact-based. You didn't insult anyone. You didn't threaten. You simply laid out the reality and offered fair terms. A pause. Your father's email admitting inability to pay was the perfect piece of evidence. They couldn't argue with their own words. Will they sign? They don't have a choice. Refusing your offer means foreclosure proceedings begin January 16th. Richard knows that. He'll explain it to them. I leaned my head against the headrest. The hotel windows glowed with Christmas lights. Lydia, can you have the formal settlement agreement ready by 9 a.m. tomorrow? I want them to receive it first thing. Already drafting. The key provisions will include full debt satisfaction upon sale of the property, forgiveness of any remaining balance, and a complete waiver of future financial claims in both directions. They won't be able to ask you for anything ever again, but you also won't be pursuing anything beyond this agreement. Perfect. One personal question. Her voice softened. Are you okay? I thought about it. The house I'd grown up in, the parents who'd written me off, the grandmother I never got to say goodbye to. I will be, I said finally. For the first time in 8 years, I think I'll actually be okay. We ended the call. I walked into the hotel alone on Christmas Eve, but not lonely, not anymore. My hotel room was quiet. Through the window, I could see the lights of Hartford twinkling in the distance, and somewhere out there, families were gathering around trees, opening presents, being together. I poured myself a glass of water from the minibar and sat by the window. My phone buzzed. A text from Jordan Mills, my co-founder at Strata Financial. Merry Christmas, boss. Everything's quiet here. Hope your trip went okay. We're all thinking of you. I smiled and typed back. Trip was exactly what I needed. Merry Christmas to everyone. I'll be back the 26th. Then I opened my photos and scrolled to the image of my grandmother, Martha Yeager. She'd been the only one in that family who ever made me feel like I belonged. She'd encouraged my interest in computers when everyone else mocked it. She'd slipped me extra money when I was in college. And she'd died believing her granddaughter had abandoned her. I didn't abandon you, I whispered to the photo. They just didn't let me say goodbye. I thought about Patricia's face when she realized I owned their debt. The shock, the anger, the dawning understanding that the daughter she'd dismissed was now holding all the cards. It didn't feel like victory, not exactly. It felt more like release. For 8 years, I'd carried the weight of their rejection, their silence, their lies, and tonight I'd finally set it down. Tomorrow, they would receive the settlement agreement. Within weeks, they would sell the house. And after that, the Yeagers would no longer have any claim on me, legally, financially, or emotionally. I finished my water and climbed into bed. Outside, snow began to fall softly over Hartford. My first Christmas without a family. And somehow, the most peaceful one I'd ever known. December 26th, 2024. 11 o'clock a.m. I was already back in Austin when Lydia called with the news. They signed. I set down my coffee. Both of them? Both of them. Richard brought them into a law office in Stamford this morning. The settlement agreement has been executed, witnessed, and notarized. I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. It's done. Any problems? Your mother tried to negotiate. She wanted to reduce the waiver provision, keep some kind of door open for future family discussions. Richard shut that down immediately. He explained that if they rejected your terms, you'd proceed with collection, and they'd lose everything instead of walking away with whatever equity remains after the house sells. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Richard had done exactly what I'd expected. Translated the situation into terms my parents couldn't argue with. What about my father? Lydia paused. According to the attorney who handled the signing, he was quiet throughout. Just before he signed, he reportedly said, "This is my fault. I should have called her years ago." Something shifted in my chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But something. The house goes on the market in January, Lydia continued. Conservative estimate is $4.1 to $4.3 million, more than enough to satisfy the debt. Whatever surplus remains after closing costs goes to your parents as a final settlement. And after that? After that, the waiver takes effect. No future financial claims from either party. The legal relationship between you and your parents is concluded. I looked out my office window at the Austin skyline. The sun was bright, the new year was coming. Thank you, Lydia, for everything. Just doing my job. A pause. But for what it's worth, I'm proud of how you handled this. So was I. The gossip spread faster than I expected. By the first week of January, my phone began buzzing with messages from old high school acquaintances I hadn't heard from in years. Word had gotten out that the Yeager estate was being listed for sale, and people were connecting the dots. Emily Thornton, the woman I'd run into at the coffee shop, texted me, "OMG, is it true your parents are selling the house because of you?" I didn't respond. The social fallout for my parents, according to Margaret's occasional updates, was swift and brutal. Patricia had been quietly removed from the Fairfield County Country Club's holiday planning committee. Her closest friends, women who'd spent decades performing friendship while calculating social advantage, suddenly found themselves too busy to return her calls. My father, meanwhile, had retreated entirely. He stopped coming into the office, leaving the skeleton crew at Yeager and Associates to manage the final months of the company's existence. Derek was the first casualty. In the third week of January, with the company hemorrhaging clients and preparing for dissolution, his position as Director of Business Development was eliminated. He'd never actually developed any business anyway. According to public records, Lydia kept me informed as a matter of legal diligence, Yeager and Associates officially ceased operations on February 1, 2025. The 47 employees who'd worked there in 2016 had already dwindled to 18. Now there were none. The Yeager name, once synonymous with Connecticut real estate, had become a cautionary tale. I didn't feel triumphant about any of it. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt finished. The past was finally becoming the past, and I was free to focus on the future. December 28, 2024. An email arrived from Margaret. Subject: Just wanted to reach out. I opened it with a mixture of caution and curiosity. Dear Exley, I'm not writing to ask you for anything. I'm not writing on behalf of your parents. I haven't spoken to Patricia since Christmas Eve, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to. I just wanted you to know something. I should have stood up for you years ago. When your mother started telling everyone you were traveling abroad, I knew it was wrong. When they didn't invite you to Thanksgiving or Christmas or your grandmother's funeral, I knew it was wrong. And I said nothing because I was afraid of Patricia. I've been afraid of her my whole life. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth. I don't expect you to forgive me, or any of us. What they did, what we all enabled by staying silent, was inexcusable. You deserved better. You deserved a family that celebrated your success instead of treating it like an embarrassment. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. No pressure, no expectations. Just your aunt who's finally found the courage to say what she should have said 8 years ago. I'm proud of you, Exley, not because of Forbes or the $1 billion. I'm proud of you because you walked into that room on Christmas Eve with your head held high and you finally told them the truth. That took more strength than I've ever had. Love, Margaret. I read the email 3 times. Then I saved it to a folder and closed my laptop. A week later, I wrote back, "Thank you for saying this. I need time, but I appreciate you reaching out. Maybe someday we can talk properly. Exley." A small door, left slightly open. January 2025. Austin. I threw myself back into work with renewed energy. The Christmas trip had taken something out of me, but it had also removed a weight I'd been carrying for 8 years without fully realizing it. Strata Financial was preparing for a potential IPO in late 2026. There were investor meetings, strategy sessions, product launches. My calendar was full from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. most days, and for the first time in years, I was grateful for the distraction. But I also did something I'd never done before. I started seeing a therapist. Dr. Rebecca Morrison, recommended by a friend at another tech company. I sat in her office twice a week and talked about things I'd never admitted to anyone. The shame I'd felt when my parents stopped speaking to me. The guilt of not being there when my grandmother died. The fear that I'd never really belong anywhere. "You didn't buy that debt as revenge," Dr. Morrison said during one of our sessions. "You bought it because you needed leverage to be heard. They'd been controlling the narrative for 8 years. You needed power just to get a seat at the table." She was right. It had never really been about the money. It was about being seen, being acknowledged, being treated as someone whose existence mattered. By February, I was sleeping better. By March, I'd stopped checking news from Connecticut entirely. The sale of the Jaeger house was no longer my concern. I focused on building Strata, on growing my team, on planning for a future that had nothing to do with the past. My parents had taught me one valuable lesson, even if they'd never intended to. The family you're born into is not the family you have to keep. I was building my own. April 15th, 2025. Lydia's email arrived during a break between meetings. FYI, Jaeger property closed today. Final sale price $4.1 million. I stared at the number for a long moment. The house I'd grown up in. The house where I'd learned that my ambitions were embarrassing, my interests were worthless, and my existence was conditional on obedience. Sold. According to the financial summary Lydia attached, the proceeds broke down as follows. Outstanding debt satisfaction, $4.2 million. I'd agreed to round down. Closing costs and fees, approximately $125,000. Remaining equity to Howard and Patricia Jaeger, approximately $175,000. Enough for a security deposit and a few months' rent, somewhere far from Fairfield County. I didn't know where they'd moved, and I didn't ask. The settlement agreement had worked exactly as designed. No future claims, no contact, no ongoing obligations in either direction. I read the final paragraph of Lydia's email. With this transaction complete, all terms of the settlement agreement have been fulfilled. The legal relationship between you and Howard and Patricia Jaeger is concluded. No further action required on your end. I forwarded the email to Dr. Morrison with a simple note. "It's done," she replied within the hour. "How do you feel?" I thought about it. How did I feel? Not triumphant. The image of my parents leaving that house with a fraction of what they'd once had didn't bring me joy. They'd lost almost everything, but they'd started losing it long before I'd gotten involved. Not guilty either. They'd made their choices. I'd made mine. What I felt was something simpler, something I hadn't experienced in a very long time. Closure. The chapter was finished. The book wasn't. But for the first time, I got to write the next part alone. Some evenings, when the Austin sun dips below the skyline and my office grows quiet, I sit by the window and think about what I've learned. I used to believe that family was an obligation, that blood meant you owed people things, loyalty, money, forgiveness, regardless of how they treated you. That's what I was taught. That's what I internalized. And for years, even after my parents stopped speaking to me, I carried the guilt of a daughter who'd failed to meet expectations. But here's what I understand now. Family isn't an obligation. Family is a choice. The people who stood by me during the hardest years of my life weren't Jaegers. They were Marcus, who believed in me enough to offer me a job I wasn't qualified for. They were Jordan and Rebecca, who maxed out credit cards and sold cars to build something with me. They were the early employees at Strata who worked 18-hour days because they believed in what we were creating. That's family. People who show up, people who see you, people who don't make their love conditional on your compliance. My parents wanted me to be a certain kind of person, Ivy League educated, appropriately married, working in the family business. When I chose a different path, they chose to pretend I didn't exist. That was their right, and walking away was mine. I don't hate them. Hatred requires energy I'd rather spend elsewhere. But I don't need them either. Not for validation, not for approval, not for anything. Margaret and I email occasionally now, small updates, photos of her garden, links to articles she thinks I'd find interesting. It's not a deep relationship, not yet. But it's a door that stayed open. That's more than enough. I chose my own family, and that family chose me back. If you've made it this far, I want to speak directly to you. Maybe you're watching this because you've been overlooked by the people who were supposed to love you. Maybe you're stuck in a family dynamic where your value is measured by how useful you can be. Maybe someone in your life has gone silent on you, made you feel like you don't exist, and now expects you to show up whenever they need something. I want you to know, you're not crazy. What you're feeling is real, and you're allowed to set boundaries. Setting a boundary doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're selfish or ungrateful. It means you recognize your own worth, and you refuse to let people who don't value you dictate the terms of your life. I didn't buy my parents' debt to punish them. I bought it because it was the only way to have a conversation on equal footing. The only way to be heard by people who'd spent 8 years pretending I didn't have a voice. You might not need to do anything as dramatic. Maybe your boundary is a phone call you stop answering, a holiday you stop attending, a yes that becomes a no. Whatever it is, you're allowed to protect yourself. Because here's the truth I wish someone had told me at 23. The people who love you won't make you prove you deserve to exist. They'll just be glad you do. Thank you for watching my story. If it resonated with you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and turn on notifications. I'll be sharing more stories like this one. Check the description for more videos you might enjoy. Until next time, I'm Exley Yeager, and I hope you know you're worth more than they told you.